This is Luke Radowski of WeAreChange.org here in Acapulco, Mexico, and today we have the distinct honor and pleasure to be joined by the legend, G. Edward Griffin. Now, me and G. Edward Griffin, we've been speaking at conferences for 10 years. We never really spoke. This is the first time we're actually getting to speak. And if you haven't heard about G. Edward Griffin, you haven't heard about the biggest problem that humanity faces, and that is the private Federal Reserve banking system. Some say it's quasi, some say it's that. But G. Edward Griffin really broke it down in such important ways that other people haven't before. And I thank you for the work that you've been doing. And I would really love your insight about the current state of the Federal Reserve. We're seeing Donald Trump in office, who supported verbally the Audit the Federal Reserve bill, while at the same time appointing people for Secretary of Treasury that don't approve of this, and we're working with Goldman Sachs and we're working with other bankers. So currently today, what is the state of the Federal Reserve? What's really happening?
Well, I have to say that I think that nothing has really changed so far, and we all have great hopes that it will. But to put this into context, I want to explain that I'm not, what I might say, what comes to my mind will be totally off the cuff, but what I might say is not either a pro or con, Donald Trump. It's just an observation of what the state is and what the history is and so forth. And so I have to put that in context, which is that we have probably seen at least 30 or 40 years of political action changing from one party to the next, and one candidate to the next. We've heard a lot of rhetoric, a lot of campaign speeches, and there's one thing that emerges from that if you really stand back and look at it, and that is that there is a disconnect between what candidates say and what they do once they're elected. Okay, now this isn't Trump I'm talking about all of them. So it should be no surprise if we should find that there's a disconnect between the speeches that Mr. Trump has made and his appointments. This is, what else is new? So, no, okay, and that's the context. I think the rest of that is that politicians, whether we like them or not, whether they're on our side or the other team or whatever, they spend a lot of time and money conducting polls to find out what's bothering people, what's on their mind, what do they want to hear, and then they hire, well, I don't know whether Mr. Trump hires speechwriters, but most of them hire speechwriters to say what the public wants to hear. Okay, so in other words, I'm kind of a skeptic in this area. I think the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is who are you selecting for your key positions. And so what I see in that area is that on domestic issues, really like, whether we should have immigration, unlimited immigration, all that kind of stuff, Mr. Trump is doing a lot of the things that he said he would do, and he's easing some of the tax issues. He's really doing good things. Some of his executive orders are kind of encouraging, except I'm not a big fan of executive orders. I think that the way things should be done in a country like ours, a representative government or state anyway, that Congress should be doing these things. We don't need a king or a president to do these things by decree, but nevertheless, it shows that there's an awareness of the things that people want. But now when you shift off of that category and look at foreign policy, bigger picture on the globe, the wars, the globalism, the loss of American sovereignty, the drift toward an international currency, and now we're talking about the banking system. And in those areas, which in my view are probably even more important than the domestic issues, as important as they are, it looks like the Trump administration looks like it's going in business as usual. So that's my observation. I don't know if it'll continue or not, but I suspect it will.
To me, it's always very important to be skeptical no matter what happens and always question authority. And we have seen a large portion of the alternative media kind of go into cheerleader mode and not really be as the accountable force that they used to be. And when we're dealing with issues like the Federal Reserve, we're dealing with a very powerful, serious threat. Can you, I know this is a very open-ended kind of question, can you talk about the seriousness and the importance of the U.S. Federal Reserve?
Well, it's hard to quantify that.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, well, it's hard to quantify that because money is sort of one of those things you don't think much about, except when you don't have enough of it. You say, "I wish I had more of it," but if you look at it from a sort of a aerial view and say, what important, how important is money in society? Well, it's perhaps the most important thing of all because it's in the middle of every human transaction, except for the voluntary ones. But most people pay for services or goods. Every transaction, you're exchanging money. Now, if the hidden hand, if you want to get conspiratorial on this, if there were a group of people that you don't even know by name, you never heard of them, and they're controlling the value of that money and how much of it is being issued, how much interest is paid on it when people borrow it, they have an indirect, a hidden control over your life and maybe 50 to 100 transactions a day. And so it's incredibly important because it determines not only what you can afford to do, it determines how you are compensated for your efforts. It determines who gets most of the benefits because if you play the rules and and you do the things that this hidden hand likes, well, you get the goodies. And if you don't, well, all of a sudden you're looking around for more money. You can't get credit. You can't, and so forth. So yeah, it's incredibly important because it affects our lives, and more than our lives, it gets specific about that. It affects our financial security and our freedom, really. Because if you don't have financial independence, you have to be dependent on somebody else. And who might that be, do you suppose? Well, the government is happy to step in and take care of you. Oh, you poor fellow, we're going to take care of we'll give you a better income. We'll guarantee you a minimum wage. We'll take care of your health care. We'll pay the rent on your house. So we'll get you a job, we'll provide your education. But you better do what we say or else you're through. So it's incredibly important for financial security and our freedom.
Because nothing is free. And I think it's also important to highlight that the system rules because of our participation. And if we weren't participating, holding up that belief, which is the only thing that's holding up their whole system, I think there would be a big change because we could change that at any moment. What do you think about some of the solutions that people are offering, whether it's Rand Paul calling for an audit of the Federal Reserve or people calling for cryptocurrencies? What do you see as a potential solution to the bigger problems that we face?
Well, to be very specific, I think there's only
It's Mexico, so we got a little sound interruption, but it's okay. We'll deal with it.
that was a truck going by, I think, or a bus or something. Yeah, I think that there's only one solution to the Federal Reserve problem, and that's to abolish the Federal Reserve. If we don't need to audit the Fed, we know what it's doing. It's right out in the open. It's in your face. You can read about it. The charter tells you it has the legal right to steal. So that's what it's doing. It's plundering the American people by creating money out of nothing, charging interest on it, and devaluating the purchasing power of the monetary unit, and they're raking off all that difference. So we know what it's doing. What do we have to? Do you want to audit the mafia? Just figure out what you want to do with it. We know what the mafia does. So my theory is we don't need to audit it. We need to abolish it. So any of these other suggestions are kind of political games. People come up with these solutions because they think, well, if I said I wanted to abolish the Fed, it might sound extreme. Yes, it sounds extreme because we have an extreme problem, and extreme problems have only extreme solutions. But politicians don't want that because they're afraid they'll lose some votes. I can understand that. I can understand. That's why I would never be any good in politics because I'd say it the way it is. Yeah. If you don't like it, well then, I'm sorry, brother, but that's it. Yeah. But politicians cannot do that, I suppose. Although I think they could, but they don't. Yeah. So that's my view on that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of control, there's a lot of extortion, there's a lot of other surrounding things that not many people know about that you were able to put in great detail in your books and in your lectures and everything that you have done throughout your tremendous career. Last question is it possible? Can we do it?
Of course it's possible. Everything is possible. If we just have enough desire, enough motive power to do it. It's not easy. There's the difference between possible and easy. And in a way it is easy too because all we have to do is create an awareness among the American people of what the scam really is. Now, that's not so easy because people don't want to read, they don't want to hear it, and so forth. But it's simple, let's just say it that way.
Yeah.
Once the people understand, then they'll put pressure on their political so-called leaders. They're not really leaders, they're followers, but they'll do whatever the public wants, you know. And then all of a sudden, the people who are calling for an audit of the Fed will say, we ought to abolish the Fed, see? And then the next step is to actually do it, you see. We've had this before, but say, yeah, we should abolish the Fed, and then it comes time for the vote. Oh, well, I changed my mind, you know. So it all starts, though, with public awareness to build that public pressure, political pressure on these elected people, and then it can happen.
Like we've seen Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz kind of capitulate on that issue when it came up to vote, watering down the bill as well. Is there anything else you would like to say about the current status of the Federal Reserve or Donald Trump, or anything that you're doing that people should be aware of?
Well, yeah, I'd like to say these are interesting and exciting times, and even though it's a little scary because I think we're coming down to the point, we're coming to the finish line, let's say. I don't think this contest, this debate, this conflict can go on much longer. One side or the other is going to have to totally capitulate. And I used to think, I'm afraid that freedom is going to be on the downside. It's going to be the downside dog. And, you know, the big dog on top is going to be collectivism and statism and so forth. But now it's beginning to look like the underdog might get back up on top, and the fight is continuing now. And of course, the collectivists know that, and there's nothing more dangerous than a wounded bear. So it's coming to a head, and I think we're going to see it very soon. So it's exciting, it's a little scary, but I'm glad to know that we have at least, we're in the scrap, you know? We're in the fight. We still have a chance if we can just reach out to our friends and neighbors and tell them, come on, wake up. It's you we're trying to help, not just us.
I couldn't agree with you more, 110%, and it all starts with sharing information, sharing knowledge, getting the information out there, and you can do that by sharing this video. And thank you so much for all the amazing work you have done throughout your career. The links to G. Edward Griffin will be in the description below. Just appreciate you so much, and it's good to be in this fight with you, and I think we're going to do it.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.